So today we're going to continue with transformation of functions. Now we know all the different transformations that we can have for a function. We can shift up and down, we can go right or left, and we can stretch or shrink. So now what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to give you a parent function, one of our basic block functions, and I'm going to give you a sequence of transformations that I want you to execute. So let's kind of go through this. If you're doing this the first time, you can pull out the cheat sheet so that you can see the various transformations and then try to see how I'm doing things. All right, when you do your homework, I want you to use the same approach that I'm using so that you can understand what is going on when you're moving things around. So, my first question here is f of x is equal to x squared, and I want to do a shift upwards 3 units. So, on the left side, what I want to say is that I want to take the function and I'm moving it up or down. So it's a plus c. So in this case, let's shift upwards 3 units. I'm going to do f of x plus 3. And what that means is that if I go to the parent function, which is x squared, I am going to add a plus what? A plus 3. All right. Now let's look at the next example. So the next example, I have a parent function, which is the square root, and we know what this graph looks like. All right, we can even sketch the first one. Let's sketch the first one. So the first one, I have a parent function, which is this, a parabola. Or if I pick just one point to illustrate, that's 0, 0. And it says do what to it? Move it upwards. So the graph 0, 0 is going to move up. The y value is the one that is changing. So you get 2, 3. It's right there. And the graph looks like that. Okay. So let's return back to 2 and see if we can execute the sequence of events of transformation that is happening over here. So my parent graph is f of x is equal to square root of x. And I want to first shift downwards by 2 units. So on the left, I'm trying to do f of x minus 2, meaning when I take the graph of square root of x, I'm going to move it 2 places down. And then I'm going to reflect about the x-axis. So that means that I need to take that function and negate that function. But this function is currently minus, to parentheses, f of x minus 2, because that's the entire function now that I'm taking, and I'm trying to multiply through with the negative, reflect about the x-axis. So this will become negative square root of x plus 2. Let's look at the next one. So I have this parent graph that is absolute value x plus 1. And I want to execute the sequence of transformation provided over here. And I have reflect about the x-axis, shift downwards by 3, and shift to the left by 1. So if I execute the first one, it says reflect about the x-axis. That means that I'm going to take f of x and I'm going to negate it, because that's what it means to reflect about the x-axis. So this will become negative absolute value of x plus 1. And then it says shift down by 3. So I'm going to take this negative f of x and I'm going to move it down minus 3, meaning I have negative x plus 1 minus 3. And then finally, I'm going to shift to the left by 1. And you got to be very careful with this information here. You are not just adding a plus 1 to the x that you already see over here. What is really happening is that you have negative x minus 3. Oh, by the way, let me make this bigger. I got negative x minus 3. When I talk about shift to the right, to the left by -1, what I'm literally doing is that I'm going to go into the function which already has an x, and I'm going to remove it, and you're going to replace with that shift, which means x minus x plus 1. So in place of this input x, I'm going to take it out, and I'm replacing that with what? X plus 1, to mean I want to shift to the left by 1. So now this is the input. Wherever I go into my function, I'm going to replace it with what? With this new input called x plus 1. So I end up with minus 1 minus absolute value, and then the input, which is what? X plus 1, replaces the x in the previous line. And then I'm going to add my plus 1 to it and minus 3. So if you clean up this, I'm going to get negative absolute value x plus 2 minus 3. Okay, so we have to understand what's going on. Don't just think, oh, I'm just adding a plus 1. You really taking out that input, which was x, and replacing it with the shift, which means x plus 1 for to the left, and if it was to the right, it would be x minus what? X minus 1. Okay, let's look at the next example. The next example is I have my basic block function x cubed, and I want to shrink vertically by 1/2, shift to the right by 2 units, and shift down 4 units. So if I start off with the first one, it says I have my f of x, and since it's a vertical shrink, I'm going to put a 1/2 on the outside, meaning that I have 1/2 x cubed. And then I have a shift to the right by 2 units, meaning that my new input is x minus 2. I'm shifting, so I'm going to take out the x, which is originally in this function, and I'm going to replace it with what? X minus 2. So I end up with 1/2 f x minus 2, which means that when I come to the original function, I have 1/2, and then I have x minus 2 cubed. And then it says shift down by 4 units. So I'm going to take 1/2 f of x minus 2, and then I'm going to move it down. So minus 4 would mean that I have 1/2 x minus 2 to the cube minus 4. All right, let's look at the last two. I have this parent function, which is x squared, x plus 3 squared plus 5. And I need to stretch by a factor of 2, reflect about the y-axis, shift to the right by 3 units. So when I start this, I have my function. And what I might do, I'm stretching by a factor of 2. That means I need to multiply this function by 2, so I get this. Meaning when I go to this function over here, I'm going to take 2, and I'm going to multiply that whole function by x plus 3 squared plus 5, which gives me 2 gives me 2 x plus 3 squared plus 10. That's what I get for 2f of x. And then I want to reflect about the y-axis. So this, if you look at the cheat sheet, says that all the x in the function becomes minus x. So I'm going to take 2, and my new input is now negative x. So wherever I see an x in my function, I'm going to replace it with what? A negative x. So this will become 2, and then I have negative x plus 3 squared plus 10. And then it says shift to the right by what? By 2. That means that I'm going to remove the x and replace it with what? X minus 2. So now I'm going to take this function now, 2f, and wherever I see x, I'm going to replace it with x minus 2. So when I come over here, wherever I see x, I'm going to remove that x, and I'm going to replace it with what? X minus 2. So I get 2 into parentheses minus, and then this new x is now x minus 2. So I have my x minus 2, and then I have my plus 3, all squared, plus 10. Now we can clean up this expression a little bit. So we have 2 negative x, that's positive, plus 5 squared plus 10. All right, let's look at the last one. The last one I have over here is absolute value of x. And the information that the sequence that we need to follow through is shrink horizontally by a factor of 1/3, reflect about the x-axis, shift to the left by 2 units, and shift upwards by 4. So that's a lot, but let's see. So step 1, I need to shrink horizontally. So shrinking horizontally, remember that it's counterintuitive. So when it says that you have f instead of 1/3, you mean really 3x. And so I'm going to have absolute value of 3x. And then step 2 says reflect about the x-axis. That means I have a negative f of 3x. And that's the negative of absolute value 3x. And then it says shift to the left by 2 units. That means that I'm going to remove the x and replace it with what? X plus 2. So I'm going to end up with negative f 3x plus 2, meaning I have negative absolute value 3 x plus 2, which is the same as negative absolute value 3x plus 6. And then it says shift it up by 4. So step 4, I got negative f of 3x plus 6 plus 4 would mean I have the negative absolute value 3x plus 6 plus 4. Okay, so that is it for the first part of the video today. In the next video, we'll look at the general case, and then we'll come up with a plan on how we kind of describe the sequence of events happening when I have a function given to us. Okay.